Splendid. Well, good afternoon all. Yet another week survived in your lockdown state. Hopefully nobody's gone stir-fry crazy within your confines of your house, and your families have all survived well. I've got to say it's been a relatively relaxed week here. I'm not supposed to be working, but I've probably worked 3 days out of the 5 this week, which is a bit of a pain. So welcome to the Commit Happy Hour here on the 15th of May with your hosts, myself and Stuart Young, who has been putting together the productivity sessions into the future with our 2 sponsors, Rebim and O2 Business. And what we're looking at today is looking at virtual reality, looking at some of the virtual and augmented reality use cases that will help us to deliver that into the industry at large. So on our panel today, who have we got, Stuart?
We've got Sue Butcher, we've got Vince Sumner, we've got Max Malliot Parfit, we've got Jerry, and obviously yourself and myself.
Fantastic, really good lineup. Some excellent names there. Some names that everybody will recognise. I hope everybody's got their drink for the evening. Personally, this afternoon I have got a very nice cup of Darjeeling, fortified as all best sappers can do with a drink with a spot of Jura. It's just a little too early for gin and tonic because I've got a little bit of work to do after this. So we've started on that. Hopefully everybody else has a good beer. Or a glass of vino. Jerry, you're more of a wine drinker. Have you got a glass of beer?
Just wine.
Splendid. Sue?
Sue, I'm drinking water as usual at the moment, I'm afraid.
Terrible. Well, I suppose it's best to stay rehydrated.
Yes.
I've got some pride.
Oh, excellent. Bit of London pride, Stuart. Very good. What have you got, Vin?
I got a drop of Hopadolic.
Ah, excellent.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And Max, you're on the line here. What have you got? I know you're our non-alcoholic person in the organisation.
Well, I'm with Sue. I was on water, but unfortunately, as you can see, my my glass is a little empty, so I might just pop and fill it up.
Splendid. Before we get going, warm up the vocal cords and get us in there. I can see we've got 26 people in. So, Stuart, what I'm going to do is hand over to you and to start the session.
Okay, great. Well, what I want to just do is talk about the facility that we've got for questions. And we've got a couple of options here. If anybody wants to ask any questions of any of the panelists, you've got the dialogue box on the right-hand side. You can type in your question there, or you can raise your hand. Now, what I will say is we've added in a bit of an extra feature this week. We did a trial run on it last week, and it's in response to a number of questions that people like to stick around or would like to stick around after the session and ask questions directly and generally have an informal chat. So what we will do, for those that want to stick around, at the end, we'll open the mic up, we'll bring everybody in to sit in the panelist box, and you can fire away, ask questions at your leisure. So hopefully we can stay as long as we want. It's a free bar, so it's help yourself, and generally have a great time. So, the other thing I will mention as well is you can see on the screen I've introduced the poll questions. Now we have 3 poll questions at the end of Vin's session, and it's multi-choice. You just hit the button, and I'll share the results of that. They are questions that pertain to the session, and also ask questions about what as individuals or organisations you're actually doing in respect of VR and AR. So, just moving on, I want to talk a little bit about Commit to Productivity. This is an initiative that was started in Commit a little while back. It carries on all the good work that we've been doing in improving productivity. We got these initiatives, or sorry, we've got this initiative and the webinars which underpin or support the productivity improvement, and it tries to look at what productivity means to you as an organisation or as an individual. It also tries to support and ask the question that, you know, do you have the means to improve productivity? Maybe you need some support to do that. And hopefully, with the series of webinars, there's opportunities within that to help you do what you need to do to improve it. And also, it gives an opportunity to look outside of the industry to other industries, aerospace, and so on, other businesses and organisations, and how it's helped them, and similarly how we can transfer the skills and abilities that others have made good use of to help us in our industry. So with that, I've got one more request to ask, and if there are any opportunities to share other productivity initiatives, then please do get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. There are quite a few people who've followed up from previous sessions and shared information, and I'm very happy to discuss how we might include you in future presentations. So I want to talk very, very briefly about the Commit to Productivity initiative. As everybody's tuned in today will know that behind all the technological initiatives in our industry is a simple goal, and that is improving productivity. And often the best improvements come from this combination of knowledge, process, and technology. There's a series of there's a number of areas there that are listed, and whilst we've had a few subjects that have fitted into those areas in the presentations we've done so far, there's still an awful lot more out there that can actually contribute to improving productivity. These are the areas that we're going to cover in the initiative, and we've formed a little bit of a working group of like-minded individuals who've got a keenness to improve productivity. And again, if anybody wants to get involved, love to hear from you. So I'll move on. I'm going to talk now about today's session. It's entitled Fabricating Reality, and we'll hear from Vin in a moment about the benefits of virtual reality and augmented reality. And Vin's going to share some use case information as well. Virtual reality was best known for the gaming industry, but not anymore. No, it broke into construction a few years back. I don't know precisely how many, but it's making a significant difference to the projects in several ways. With its ability to create accurate and interactive content, it is no surprise that VR is increasingly being used in the realms of design and construction. I've seen some really good examples where it can be used to not put people at risk in the high-risk environment we've got in construction, to improve safety. But VR is all about the creation of a virtual world that users can interact with. Users can wear VR headset, goggles, stand in a cave, and that will enable them to step inside a project while it is still in design. VR offers great potential, specifically in design, and it offers the opportunity to do a walkthrough and experience a project as it will function and appear when the final as-built product is delivered. So with that, I'm going to move now into introducing Vin. And Vin is the CEO and founder of Pixel Mill Digital, formerly Clicks and Links. Vin's based in Manchester, and he specialises in immersive technology. He has a long history of working with virtual worlds ever since it was, well, he founded the organisation in 2000, and it was one of the first to host virtual concerts in Second Life, a long way from what is considered to be immersion today. Vin brings over 30 years experience in ICT, ranging from running public sector businesses in a large software organisation to setting up his own organisation. Vin brings a strong knowledge of ICT alongside an ability to understand how innovation and new technologies can be applied in industry. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Vin. And Vin,
Going to hand over to me, eh?
You should have control.
Okay.
All yours.
Have you got my screen?
Yes. We have
Okay.
yours.
I've got a full screen of mine, so if anything weird happens, let me know, because I'm just looking at the presentation. Hi
Okay.
everybody. I think some of you know me. I've been around showing off VR a few times over the last number of years. What I wanted to do this afternoon was just a couple of lines about Pixel Mill, who we are, then talk about what we've called a spatial and immersive industry. There's lots of names flying around, but we're using that as to try and incorporate VR and AR and all those sorts of terms. Some thoughts on what's happening in construction, both overall and the extent to which these technologies are being used, and then talk through a number of use cases we've been involved in with a variety of clients, and then finish off with very current initiative that we're looking at in relation to the COVID crisis, and see if I can get some people to work with us on that. So I think I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, hopefully, and then we can have some questions later. So who are we? We used to be called Clicks and Links, which the name had been around since 2000, which was very webby sort of name. We decided last summer that we needed something more visualization related and changed the name to Pixel Mill. Mill being a play to our Manchester home. We're based in the northern quarter of Manchester, or where we normally are based in the northern quarter of Manchester at the moment. I'm somewhere in a cloudy Cheshire. We a dozen people, a lot of who come from the games industry. We turn over about $500,000 a year. We keep fairly steady like that, and we do technology projects. Basically, we're a technology company. Probably since, as Stuart alluded to, since around 2005, we've been involved in visualization projects. Originally in a platform called Second Life that some of you have heard of, no doubt, and more recently other games platforms and VR and AR and such like. We work across industries, so that makes it very interesting in many ways. So we do projects in the cities, rail, nuclear. We're doing some work at the moment around football coaching, and we've done work in health and retail as well. So quite a mix of different places where we're applying the same sorts of technologies. We're pretty much a project organization, so we don't come with a set of products, though we have some reusable platforms that we either use ourselves or for our clients to use. So we tend to respond more to a client need than just to say, here's a product. That tends to be our approach. We'll talk a little bit about what I'm calling immersive and spatial industry. Lots of terms get used. Virtual reality, augmented reality, XR tends to be used as a sort of wide term for this now. I think sometimes the danger is that then just makes everybody think that it's all about headsets. It's not. It's about a whole load of different ways of presenting data visually, whether it's on a desktop or a headset or in a cave or whatever it would be. So please don't limit your thinking to headsets. Headsets have a great role to play, but we shouldn't be thinking everything's just about putting on headsets and what like. I think it's mixing the technologies in the right sort of way to get a visual experience that's key. And some examples there on the right or left, whichever way you're looking. It could be phones, it could be desktop, it could be a headset, and there's a whole range of headsets, and it's about bringing real and model data together. So whether it's about bringing point cloud data in, or it's about bringing CAD models or live sensor data into a place that you can visualize it better. And sometimes that might be because you want to immerse yourself into a space with a headset on, and not only you but other people as well, so that there can be collaboration. Is a key part of immersion, in my view. What's important about it? It gives you opportunity to look at different design options, It gets everyone together on the same page. If you're looking about collaborating immersively, then that's far better to have a meeting perhaps on a bridge about a bridge than in Zoom talking about some pictures of a bridge. So I think, you know, immersion allows you to actually be with the stuff you want to talk about and have a presence in that space. And you can do all the other things that you can do online. I think the other key thing, and it's one of the use cases, is around training. Immersing someone in something and getting the experience of it is a much better way for people to learn about whatever the issue is. Often use the example of riding a bike. Our NHS has some guidelines on how to ride a bike, you know, 2 pages of what you should do to ride a bike. I guess most people didn't read those. Most people got on a bike and learned how to ride a bike by riding a bike and falling off a couple of times. So experiencing something is a much better way to learn about it than just looking at it from the outside. So immersion and visualization provides that opportunity. I take the respect. I'm not a construction person. I added some comments about where I think the construction industry is. I think it's pretty well understood that it's not a leader in digital transformation. It has challenges. I think my observation is that in technology terms, there's quite a lot of proprietary software and things around. It's not the most open industry in the world, but on the same time, there's some really quite clever stuff being done with BIM and such like, but that then gets mixed with much lower tech. Everyone's tried something, probably everybody, but most people have tried something in this space, in VR, AR, but often it's become a technology pilot and it hasn't been integrated into the mainstream. There's some big challenges around at the moment, particularly health and safety, which is obviously accentuated by COVID-19. But I think there's also a great opportunity here to start to look at how digital and these sorts of technologies can make a real difference when people need to collaborate remotely and for quite some time work in quite different ways. I mean, it's possible to do things differently, and I think the country in many ways has showed that over the last 3 or 4 months, whether it's building hospitals or, you know, big digital projects when HMRC have to suddenly pay some people in different ways. You can do it. And I think every industry is going to be challenged like that, and I think construction will be no different. So there's some challenges, and I think the technologies I'm talking about do offer some opportunities. You know, whether it's collaborative design, whether it's looking at reviews of what exists, what's already been built through 360 video or LiDAR or photogrammetry, looking at actual sight lines and things like that in rail or whatever, because you can actually immerse people in the right sort of place. Collaborating, as I said before, in the space. I mean, we used to do work with some universities in this world Second Life, and they wanted us to build lecture theatres to talk about stuff. And we said, why do you want to build a lecture theatre to talk about a bridge? Let me build you a bridge and put you on the bridge, and you can talk about it properly, because that's a much more relevant thing to do than just being sat in a virtual lecture theatre or something like that. So we need to move from, you know, Zoom and go to webinar and all those sorts of great things to actually having the conversations in and around the actual thing that you're trying to do to build or whatever it would be. So just some of the things that we've been doing in this space. I mentioned some of the organisations, some of the sectors earlier. We've been working with Network Rail and a company called OnTrack, visualising parts of the rail network. We've done some projects with Sellafield and Jacobs. I'll talk about a bit more in terms of decommissioning, kind of obviously the opposite of construction in that sense. We've been working with both Siemens and Murphy on maintenance and digital twin type work, and we do city planning projects. We have a virtual reality bike. I think one or two of you have seen that. That's been used in urban planning. But what does that actually mean in terms of the sorts of things we're doing in the applications? Well, we're creating visualizations of sites. Well, I'll of people can do that. We're doing health and safety training induction, and I'll show you some examples of that. And when I talk later, the COSA initiative is very much in that space in the context of COVID-19. We've got software that can stream very large data sets into a visualization application, whether that's viewed on a headset or a desktop. And we're doing things, as I mentioned earlier, in health and sport. So quite a range of different sort of applications of these technologies. But I want to talk specifically about some more examples closer to home. I've got some, each of these has got a video, and I'll play it for a short time. I'm sure we'll make all this available to you afterwards so you can look at it in greater detail. But the hazard awareness project was one we've done for both Murphy and for EDF at Hinkley Point. The Murphy one uses what I'd say big VR, so you put a virtual reality headset on and you wander around a construction site looking for hazards. The EDF one is quite similar, but we don't use we use actually real world pictures, real world 360 pictures to identify problems on site. I'll play them both briefly so you'll get a flavour of what it's about. And then if you want to look more, you can do later. So this is the Murphy one. Hopefully that's going to play at full screen now. Basically, you're moving around a construction site. Well, in fact, initially you're starting in their office and then you're told to go and get in the car to be taken to the construction site. You go to click on the car. What a lot of people do is just walk across the car park, and then they get advised to turn around because they've been hit by a car. They've had a lot of problems with that at that particular site. They've had less problems since they did this, and then you kind of go off. It's one of those things, you can put as much signs up as you like, but actually, if you experience that, you remember it a bit more. And then you go around the site, and you click on problems, and they get fixed. Other things that you don't fix, in some cases, a consequence happens, and each time someone goes, it's randomized so that you can't just tell your mate what was there, and also you can't just click on everything because it counts the number of clicks you make. So I'll come back to this at the end of the session, because what we're looking to do is extend this to include social distancing and other COVID-19 related hazards, and we'd like the industry's help to do that. So I'll stop that one there, and if I can just come out of it. Oops, have I gone?
No, you're still here.
I'm still there. Okay. So this is one with EDF, which is similar principle but just totally different approach. So in this case we've used 360 images from Hinkley Point, and you're asked to go and identify issues. Somebody's not wearing the right PPE, or someone's not holding rails in the right sort of way. But in this case, you're using real world pictures rather than sort of gamified one, which in terms of Murphy. And it's quite easy to create these because the pictures are quick to take and link together. So different approach, but same sort of direction. We're currently doing some work down there with particularly around working at heights and such like. So that's a couple of examples around hazard awareness. The other thing we did with Murphy, which is in this same space of visualization, but it's much lower tech in a way, but it's a video, and it's a video, an induction video to engage people who are coming to site rather than just looking at PowerPoint presentations. So this was a you might have to put up with the music, so you might lose me if so we used a simple 3D model of the site to show people where everything was. You can get top-down views of it, and also actually at sort of world scale, at ground level as well, and wander around. So quite a very simple but much more memorable way of doing inductions, and we've done quite a number of these now for Murphy. So you can switch to it doesn't need to be in great levels of high quality visuals, because you're just showing where things are and not trying to sell a property at this point in time. So that's a example of these sort of technologies in a very simple but effective use case. So go back to my presentation. Another example of work we've done is with Jacobs and at Sellafield around decommissioning. So I know clearly that's the opposite of constructing things, but lots of similar challenges. In that case, they're taking stuff apart that was built, whatever it's 50 years ago. Often cases not much known about it. So we're importing into a collaborative space, VR collaborative space, point cloud data and other data got from sensors and things like that, radiation and spectroscopy and that type of thing. I don't have a video of the actual work because I'm not allowed to show that sort of stuff, but I'll just play something that I think maybe some of you have seen before from that we did with Crossrail, which shows some of the types of approach that's going on here. We're in a virtual space, and we're bringing in a whole range of different sorts of data. So it's photogrammetry data or point cloud data or CAD data, and you can be in that space with somebody else. You can annotate it, you can add objects, you can test things out, you can switch between modes just from the CAD to the point cloud, or have them both represented at the same time and see what the differences are. So this is the photogrammetry, which came from a drone that was flown down the tunnel, and it's this sort of approach that can be done in a collaborative way, and annotations either by virtual keyboard or voice and things like that. So that's a example how you can bring lots of different data into a collaborative space. And you can bring real-time data as well in if you want to. Again, I'll stop that. The video's on the slide deck, so you'll get access to it. Another example of work we've been doing, I mentioned streaming point clouds. Point clouds are obviously very large, many gigabytes and terabytes in some cases. And initially, when we did work in this space, like with the Crossrail one, we used to just bring all the points in and then render them in the application. What we do now is we convert the points to a different format. I'm not going into detail on that. And then when you're using the visualization application in VR or on desktop, whatever, it streams the points in that you need as and when you need them. So if you're looking at something, it will bring the points in. If something, whatever it is behind you or away from you, it won't bring the points in, and it will bring them in at different levels of detail depending on how far away you are. I'll play this this video, which it's around the same site that we showed earlier at Sydney Road at Crewe, but we've got some point cloud data that's come both from the narrow rail scanning train and also from a drone that scanned a bridge. And I'll flip to the point in the video where you can see some of that data being streamed in. So I'll just play that. It's a longish video, but there's if I move on a little bit, you'll see this is the point cloud data from the scanning train that's been brought in. I can move a little bit further on, and that's a colorized version of the same thing. And this is what's showing. This is what happens here is you can just click on this virtual tablet, and you can then bring another point cloud in, and that's the bridge there. You see that's come from the drone, and I've switched the point cloud off. In this example, you're getting a bit of flickering on the point cloud because as you move, the level of detail changes. So what we've now changed that to, so you can actually lock it. So once you've got data down, you can say, I want to keep that as well. But a powerful tool for rendering point clouds very quickly in a visualization application. Again, just a sample of what's there. There's more in the video for you to look at if you want to. Moving to a slightly different space, but sort of like the high-end visualization and what properties might look like in the future. So it's less about construction, but more about what things might end up looking like, or how real you can get VR and things to look. This is an example of a real-time render. So this video you see is it's actually a video of someone moving around this space, and all the things that happen in real time. So the shadows change in real time. You can change textures. You can open and shut windows with blinds and things like that. So this is high-end visualization for, more for showing what end products might look like. And you see the blinds coming down now. So remember, this is not a video. It's a video of an application that said put the blinds down. Let's try to get that point over. So again, that looks pretty real. And you can change textures and things like that. So you can apply this. It doesn't just have to be to a nice office or room. It could be whatever. You could get this level of this quality of presentation in real time. So that's that. And then I'll just flip on again. So some thoughts really about how we can move on with these sorts of technologies. I think, as I said earlier, and we've been involved in them as well, there's been a lot of pilots in construction, and not just construction, in lots of industries. The technologies can be exciting, or it probably was initially. Maybe it's not quite as exciting now for some people as it was early on, headsets and such like. And people want to try it out, but often it gets tried out in a way that, well, actually, what am I going to do with it? I like it, but what am I going to do with it? And I think it's really important that when things like pilots are done using these technologies or anything else, that there's a route to say what I'm going to do if it's successful. It's not just a trial for the sake of a trial. There's some sort of program. This might be phase 0 or whatever, or -1, just to check something out. But if it's successful and by some metrics, whatever they are, then how are you going to move on? And in that way, you can actually start small. You don't have to make huge investments, but you can make it step by step. The other thing that's really important is that the technologies I'm talking about are just one part of a solution, obviously, and there's lots of wraparound things that need to be done, and they need to be considered as well. So yes, you might be able to view something, in a headset or whatever, but what about all security issues and all those sorts of things that go with it? So they all need to be thought about as you're starting to roll these sorts of projects out. In the same way as any IT project, they're no different than that. And then that also, does say that these are change projects, not just because you're going to change the way in which people work. But there's a definite opportunity at the moment, in my view, that everyone's been collaborating online more than they were. People are trying to move things quickly in difficult circumstances. There's an opportunity for greater use of these sorts of technologies, I think, to get better understanding of what it is you're doing, whether in terms of building something, designing, whatever it would be. At the end of the day, the main thing is obviously to focus on a real world challenge, not just the use of the technology. And as a good example of that, I just want to talk about a project called COSA, COVID-19 On-Site Awareness. This really is about adding into the application I showed you earlier that we did with Murphy's, to create a sort of generic application that would run on desktop, tablets, phones, as well as headsets. In fact, headsets would be less relevant just at the moment, and that could be made available to all the industry for a small fee. And it would need to add in whatever the current, as restrictions might be in terms of working. So that might well change over time. What we've actually done is, with the help of Commit and Wilmot Dixon, we applied to Innovate UK for some funding. Some of you may also apply to a pot of funding that was available, about 20 million for 400 projects or so. Unfortunately, Innovate UK have got overwhelmed by things. They got 8,600 applications. They were expecting to let about 400 contracts, and they were supposed to be announcing that 2 weeks ago. They are just lost at the moment, it seems. They're just struggling to even tell people that it's delayed. So we don't know when the sort of results going to come out of that. So because this is as of the moment, it's not something that we can wait 6 months to find out about. We want to try and see if we can progress this anyway. And so what we'd like to see, put out a sort of call and say, are there 5 organisations out there who are willing to put 5k into a pot? And we probably best way is perhaps to do it with the help of Commit rather than directly to us. We need to cut that through. But then we could get something going, and we could get something up and running within probably about 4 to 5 weeks that we could then make available to the industry, and actually help with what is obviously quite an important issue at this moment in time. So if anybody's interested in that, then please get in touch with myself or with Ian. Those are my contact details. Do get in touch if you want to know any of the stuff I've presented on. And I think at this point I'm supposed to pass back to Stuart for a poll.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Excellent.
That was very, very interesting.
Was it? Okay. I was just talking to a screen all the time. It's like you feel like you're talking to a black hole at some point, you know. Have you got control, Stuart?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we've got quite a few questions have come in. It was interesting when you showed some really good examples of safety, and I know I mentioned that at the beginning, but I got asked to get involved in a project a few years ago when VR first came on the scene, and it was in a nuclear setting. I know you made mention of that, and it was to eliminate putting people at risk. Now, I know that's sort of been a taboo area for quite a long time, but one of the things that they wanted to highlight was that they must keep any exposure as low as reasonably achievable. In fact, that was the acronym for the project. But it was a good example, and it was early on where they took a lot of the learnings from gaming, as we mentioned, and it very quickly captured the imagination of people in the industry. And when it was shared, I couldn't believe the uptake on it. It was great, and to see some of the things that you've been doing there as well, I thought was fabulous. The thing with it is the application can go quite a lot further than where it's been used so far, and I'm really pleased to see that some organisations are using it in project inductions. I mean, some of these inductions take a long time, and there's some have even suggested using it as a pre-induction before the individuals come to site, so that at least if it's a complex environment, they can understand certain aspects before they've even arrived at site. So the final induction at the project is a fairly swift one. But having said that, they understand the issues, and it's not anything less than would have been expected anyway. So great for that. I'm very conscious we've got a lot of questions here.
Sure, just one point on that, just to react to your comment. I think one of the things about training in-induction is that you can kind of separate them off in an organisation, so you can do it. Whereas some of the other things where you're embedding, you're using this for part of design or whatever, it has to fit into a wider workflow, and that's more complex to actually happen. So you can get on with training stuff much more quickly than some of the other things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know there are some doing that. I've got I've got a couple of people that have asked multi-questions, and I'm very tempted to bring in. We've got Fran Raybuck, we've got Paul Brown. Paul, if it's okay with you, because you've asked so many questions, it might be as well if I bring you in and ask the question direct. I'm sure you're okay with that. So let me just free that up. But before I do that, one of the other things is to actually facilitate VR. What basic setup, what setup is required to make it work? I mean, if you take, for example, a client who in the old-fashioned way has got a 2D drawing, they've got a contract, they've got all the other bits and pieces. They want to avoid any change orders at the end of the day. But what does that client need to understand, you know, the new method of working or the new way of working with VR? What would you suggest, Vin?
So when you say what does he need, are you talking about what equipment does he need, or what do you mean?
What equipment does he need? And this is the basic.
I think the first thing to think is to stop and say, hang on a minute, what are you trying to do? Because the equipment you need is going to depend on what you're really trying to do here. I mean, we've got a nice example that we work in some of the network rail guys at the moment, where we're taking 2D into 3D on a screen, and then if you want to, you put a headset on because you want a greater immersion. Now, you know, it's not just about you need a headset. It's about thinking through the application, you know, and what's appropriate. So some stuff is quite happily presented on a screen in 3D. Some stuff works better with a headset. Some works better with a cave or whatever it would be. So I think it's just stop and think. What are you trying to do here? Yeah, and rather than just say I just want a piece of VR equipment.
Yeah, okay. We've got Paul Brown has joined us. Paul, I'm going to unmute you. I know you've got lots of questions there. It may be that we save a few of the questions, if you can possibly, to afterwards, because we want to try and stick to the hour. But fire away. It's an open mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Hi. First off, Vin, thanks for that presentation. That was wonderful. Met you a couple of times a few years back. The advances in the use of AR and VR has been absolutely amazing. And I'll tell you what, it's gone for the days of where some of the clients that you mentioned, I presented it to them as a possible tool for good. And I was basically ridiculed because it mentioned the name game. But over the last decade, it's literally got up into something that's really massive. Thanks for the presentation, but I wanted to ask you about your views on, you know, the use of maybe Internet of Things, real-time data, benefits for the future, 5G, and also artificial intelligence, which is used a lot in gaming.
Well, sorry, do you want me to answer, Stuart, or do you want somebody else to answer?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, yeah, go on, Ian. You were going to contribute.
I was just saying, Max, because you've been involved in a lot of things on the Internet of Things world and bringing in bits and bobs like that. What's your thinking there?
So there have been, as you mentioned, Paul, many of these fantastic technologies that have come to the fore. The thing that sticks out in my mind at the moment is a linking of 360-degree video with 5G. And about a month ago, they did the world's first live stream of 8K 360-degree video from the NFL Super Bowl, which was awesome because we had it live streaming into our VR cave, which was amazing. I'm not a Super Bowl fan, but I love geeking out with this sort of stuff. So the real-time nature that mobile technology gives us is just merging the lines between traditional construction, where you've got your designers locked away in an office, you've got your site guys, and then you've got your RFIs going between them, and a lot of logistical and contractual nightmares. And utilizing, say, the ability to get real-time data out on site in greater and greater quantities is really helping. Another application you mentioned is things like artificial intelligence. Again, 360-degree videos and stills are fantastic tools, and especially when you're putting a camera on a helmet and they're going out on site. They don't have to walk the same route every time, but when they're out on site, it's constantly recording the data out there. And using artificial intelligence and things, and some of the things that Vin showed around photogrammetry, being able to build up not only a 3D model of your site, but also a Google Earth type walkthrough, so you can experience it on a phone, you can experience it on a laptop. You don't have to use a virtual reality headset or a cave to access the same data. And it's making sure that you've got access to all these different sources of data across all technology platforms, rather than what we are so good at in construction of having, oh, well, my database that does my finances will only do my finances, and my on-site reporting will only talk to my on-site reporting. Being able to have all of this together and having the artificial intelligence to link things intelligently. And finally, the Internet of Things. Some of the work that we've done recently with the City of Helsinki Authority is using the digital twin of the city, which was a photogrammetric model taken from an aerial survey. And I don't know, every so often on my phone it pops up a message saying aeroplanes spotted flying grid pattern over city, and you get all the conspiracy theorists, but it's not. It's Ordnance Survey.
Fantastic. So we've got the technology bit.
Oh, sorry.
We're saying technology, but it seems to be outside the satellite. So on the, I'm just going to bring Sue in here. We've got the ability to do this, and we've got the technology to do this. But Sue, you probably got a really good handle on whether we are actually wanting to do this culturally, or whether we've got the impetus to actually get it done on the sites.
I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I went online to have a look to see what people were saying about AR and VR in the age of COVID, and it's really interesting what they're saying. Of course, the media talking about retail, and you can go shopping and stuff like that, and property viewing on a much more basic scale than Vin was describing. But one of the things that's come up again is virtual trade shows, and I think it's a very good example of what you were saying, Vin, about starting where the client or the user is, rather than going right off the scale, because you're Max going, this is so exciting, I'm gonna do it all. Yeah, well, you can do it all, but I've got a job to do. That's where people are standing, and they're scared of all this stuff. So I think it's really important to start with where the user is, and then they only have to take a small step to get some immediately noticeable benefit. It's and of course, if you can't go to the Super Bowl, then the big thing is great. But we're actually talking about actual practical problems on site, and if they can use their existing equipment and their existing bandwidth and all of that, that makes it more likely for it to happen. Of course, those things scale up afterwards. But when you think about how text messaging became a thing, it was discovered by young people who didn't have to pay to use it, and that's why it became popular. It wasn't designed to be used that way, but that's what it ended up being used by. And there are loads of examples of that. So for example, with maintenance, you've got there's an article from last month actually in Public Building, is it? I can't remember what PBC Today, where they were talking about housing association who are using remote assistance capability, which is something that so that the tradesperson doesn't have to go into the house. You can download the app to your phone. If you're a resident, you can take a picture and he can mark up the picture and tell you which buttons to press and that sort of thing. It's actually very simple. It's not even really augmented in a way, but it has a collaborative element and it has a distancing element. And another example, I think, is I remember virtual trade shows being a thing 10 years ago. And I don't know when, because Vin was talking about Second Life. When Second Life was around, a virtual trade show was a thing where you made your avatar and you actually walked into the trade show and you walked up to a stand and you met real person who was another avatar. But one of the issues is that, you know, we've done all that, or well, some of us have, and you needed certain power in your computer, and a lot of it was just clunky and you know, messy, and didn't have the sort of pizzazz that going to trade show has. So you have to think about what you're actually trying to provide to the user that they really want. So with a trade show, for example, you're thinking the person, the people at the trade show want people to walk past their stand. They want, in other words, they want people to browse. You need to allow people to browse. They don't actually have to walk past things in an avatar. They need to browse. They need to have the opportunity to interact. They want to meet and greet people they know. So there's an element of that. They want to go and have private chats. They want to ask questions and get answers immediately. They want to be impressed. And, you know, they might go onto socials and clinics and stuff like that. But Koenigsegg, for example, we're going to do a big launch of one of their cars, and the trade show, all the trade shows have basically been postponed at the moment, so they're all going to happen in November, and we're not going to be able to go to all of them. In fact, a lot of people aren't going to want to go to all of them, so they might get postponed until next year, because there'll be so many anyway, because the ones in the spring and summer have been postponed. So what Koenigsegg have done is said, well, we've put all this investment in, so they made a space where they could set it all up, and then they did a show, the same sort of show that they would have done on stage, but they did it live streamed on YouTube, and, you know, and they had the same sort of interactive thing. So everyone got the thing they wanted, but they didn't have to, you know, get extra technology. So that's the really important thing, is to focus on what you're trying to get the person to do differently and make that as simple as possible.
Brilliant.
Can I just come back on that? I know I do get carried away. Some practical examples of where technology is really already helping on site and how it's being adapted to the COVID situation. Let's take Thames Tideway, for example, big new super sewer in London. They are already using the technology such as the low energy Bluetooth that Comet has trialed in the past. And the low energy Bluetooth is for monitoring people's activity under the ground, to make sure that if their movement stops, they can be checked on in case they've fallen and there's an injury. Equally, that low power Bluetooth is the same technology that the government is touting to tell if two phones are within 2 meters of each other. So that technology already is there. It's just a tweak to the software to suddenly then also sound an alarm if someone's got too close to someone else. But equally, if there is consistent offence, and not offence, but consistent, you can't work safely within 2 meters of each other, do you then have to look at enhanced PPE for those employees as an employer?
Brilliant. So we've got lots of questions in the bank here. I think we've got Fran Raybuck. Fran, I think you are a panelist, so you can unmute your mic, possibly.
Yes, no, Fran, you'll be able to fire away. Fran, we should see your webcam any second. Okay, fire away,
Hey, Fran.
Ah, there we go. Hey. Splendid. Good to hear from you.
Oh, I like my Zoom backgrounds better, but anyway. Vin, nice to virtually meet you. I had a couple questions. Lately, probably over the last year or so, I've been seeing the movement to sort of renaming, saying XR, VR, AR, and stuff like that, calling it spatial computing. Yeah. And you sort of have that. Are you seeing that in the industry generally as being the term that describes the uber alles, you know, of all the technologies that go into creating these immersive environments, really?
I think there's been a few attempts, because VR on its own was a little bit limiting, and then people started to use the term XR, which was VR, AR, mixed reality. But they all became a bit marketing terms as well, I think, to some degree. So I think immersive was was a helpful term, but then, you know, that again, that makes people think, oh, it's just about headsets. Sometimes it can be really immersive looking at something on a screen, but you know, you don't have to have a headset. So I think immersive and spatial are a bit more descriptive of what's going on, rather than VR. I mean, you don't, as was mentioned earlier, you can do quite a lot with a 360 picture, yeah, and that's not a real-time renderer or anything, or what technically might be VR. But so I think people get hung up on some of these things, and obviously the marketeers in the industry want to make it, you know, everything's VR or whatever it would be. But I think spatial and immersive are probably good terms. Visualization, and then start from that point of view, and it's then not just about, I'm just trying to sell you a headset or whatever it is. It's, I'm trying to understand what you're trying to do, and can these technologies help you? Yeah, which is where I would come from.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the headset. On the headset side, unfortunately, it creates a great experience, but at the same time, it becomes limiting in the sense that the headsets are pretty expensive, and you're limited to the number of people. I'd like to see this move, and I think the industry will move towards more of the video interaction we have here, but the screen, instead of being flat screen, becomes something more 3D-like or immersive in some ways. It's the predominant way that real video gaming is happening and things like that. You have very detailed experiences. Until the industry moves to a low-cost way to have increased participation, I think the VR, AR space and the things that you're doing are great, but especially now, and I've seen this at conferences, you get long lines of people that line up to put on the mask to demonstrate it. And now I don't even know in the current environment if you'll be able to really be putting on masks and things like that, because I wouldn't want to wait in line and put something on. We can't even get 6 feet in front of each other, let alone swap masks at times. So I'm looking at the practical nature of where the technology will go, because it will go to the lowest cost, most useful, I think, experience in general. So the work that you're doing is great. And I think the emphasis is going to be on capturing it with like 3D cameras and stuff like that. And I've shown the Theta and several others. I'm sure you've probably used some of the stuff that are pretty amazing and low cost consumer devices that can be very useful.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Fran, for your, sorry, Vin, I was just going to say thanks, Fran, for the question. I'm conscious of the time. Anybody wants to stick around? We've got the after hours session afterwards, and we can ask a few more. Just want to deal with the questions that came in. There was one that came in from Mark. Just 1 second. This was for Max, actually. Has any thoughts on the LiDAR application for iPads?
LiDAR as in the embedded sensor on the iPad?
Maybe what I can do is bring in Mark. 1 second. Mark, I'll bring you in. Okay. Okay. Unmuted, Mark. You want to ask your question directly to Max?
Can you hear me?
Hi there, Mark.
Yeah.
Loud and clear. Mark,
the iPad have now got this LiDAR thing. Max, I've just noticed that the iPad, when I think it was about April time, the iPad have got this LiDAR sensor on it, and a lot of our engineers will walk around with iPads now, and can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks like a great application for recording information in 3D, possibly. And I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts and if there are any applications or anywhere that we could actually benefit from this new application on the iPad.
Sure. So I've not seen the latest application. Unfortunately, I've got a 2016 iPad that hasn't got a LiDAR scanner on it, so I'm yet to get my hands on the new shiny. However, tablet-based LiDAR has been around for a couple of years. So, for example, 5-3D, they used a modified Kinect sensor back before LiDAR was part of the embedded hardware. And their 5-3D software was able to then, you could literally walk around. So you had your tablet on a sort of a handheld tripod, and you'd go around and almost, it was like painting. You got the live view, so the augmented view of the environment on your phone, and then it was overlaid by a color heat map. And the idea was you wanted to turn as much of your environment as possible green. And you did that by looking at things from different sides. And that built up very quickly a 3D model. And where we found that most useful actually wasn't scanning large areas, because there's much better technology out there for it. Where we found it really valuable was scanning things like plant rooms, because it's highly congested. It's not somewhere you're able to get a standard traditional LiDAR into easily. And to get the full coverage, you'd have to set up so many different scan points to get the coverage, so you filled all your holes. Whereas with a handheld device, so with the iPad, for example, you could literally just go and look around all the different bits of equipment, capture them from all the different angles, and have a very accurate 3D model. Now, with respect to that LiDAR camera on the iPad, I assume that Apple at some point will be releasing the SDK so that developers can get in and pull the information out. It might already be available. I'd have to have a look. But the fact that this technology is already embedded in devices, I mean, the camera that I'm looking at here to you now has biometric face tracking. It uses an infrared camera as well as the RGB camera. So I can unlock my PC just by looking at it, because it recognizes the biometric structure of my face. As this technology is now, yeah, I know I need a shave. Or if you wear glasses, it causes all sorts of problems. But as this technology is becoming more pervasive in devices, Fran made a fantastic point. The technology for it to be used, much like texting and text messages, until it's in a device like this, it's not accessible to the masses. Now, your guys are already out on site. If they've already got the technology in their hand, and that technology can be used to generate the 3D models, then all the power to you. It's something that I'm interested in. I have to go research it.
Once you've captured that 3D information, then we can start thinking about using it in some of these other technologies, like your Cave or some of these other sort of AR or whatever applications.
Indeed. And until that technology is available in the hardware that everyone has, as maybe a poor man's solution to start off with, or as a low-level adoption, I know this was done on Crossrail and HS2, using mobile phones to capture lots of images and then building up photogrammetric models is a starting solution. But no, the holy grail is to have something that's an all-encompassing scanner. I mean, integrate a thermal imaging sensor onto a device like this, suddenly you've got a way of signing off concrete pours. And there's lots of potential there. And equally, going into the world of, say, social housing, being able to get a user to say, hey, something's not working, or being able to point a phone at a wall and see maybe where there's a heat bridge, or maybe there's a hot pipe that's not hot, or a hot pipe that should be hot. And yeah, the technology is coming on leaps and bounds. It's now just a matter of hooking into that data.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark, for the question. Those that want to stick around, let me just wrap things up now. Stick around for the lock-in. There are still some questions, and there's still questions coming in. Those that have become panelists, if you want to stay, please do. Very welcome. But I just need to wrap up and make sure that we're around about the hour long. So just moving on, I want to just identify. I want to say thank you very much. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, O2 Business and Rebim. Thanks to Vin for the session today. There is another session next week. Please tune in and join that one. Join the conversation. All the recordings are on the Commit website. And I suppose the last thing I need to say is let's continue the conversation in the lock-in. So those that want to stay behind, please do. You're very welcome. So without further ado, I'll just close the recording down, and we can.
Well, good health to all those who are staying, but welcome to everybody else who's going to be staying in the pub.
Did you do the poll, Stuart?
No, I didn't actually. I couldn't get them to post. It must have been something to do with the slide. I suppose we could do them now. Let me see if I can get them back up on the screen. Yeah, well, we've still got people. Okay, so those that are still left, here's the first question.
Oh, it works.
It does now. It didn't
Hooray!
before. It didn't before.
Oh, how do we
Can
do the
everybody see
poll,
that?
Stuart?
Sorry?
Oh, okay, we'll press the poll button. Okay, gotcha.
All right. I can't because I'm a panelist. Panelists can't vote.
Same here.
Right.
Damn you, go to webinar. Damn you. I'm answering yes.
Oh, I don't think I can vote either.
No, no. Presenters and panelists can't vote. It'll only be the audience.
Oh, shocking.
So that's only about 8 people now.
We had a hardware failure there, but anyway, no worries. I'm going to. Can everybody see the results?
100%. Yes. Good.
Okay. Next question. Next question.
Nope, that's the same one again.
Oh, is
Same
it?
one.
It's to your business.
Yeah.
It's different.
Isn't it?
It's to your business
Your
rather than the
business.
industry.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Subtle. Too subtle for a Friday afternoon.
That's too quick to jump to criticism there.
Friday afternoon with a belly full of whiskey.
Okay,
Ooh.
thank you for that. I'll close that up and let me share. Let me share. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Any surprises?
Mostly don't know.
It's 100% construction, but 25%, only 25% to self.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know if that's because people are maybe not understanding, say, the return on investment potential, or whether it's more of a concern around technology adoption. It'd be interesting to drill into that one a bit further in a future session.
Potentially, and maybe we can ask that next.
Whether that might be more of a communications problem in the fact that you know your business is doing it somewhere, but you've got no idea whether it actually is, because it doesn't affect me on a day-to-day basis. I don't know. I've got no idea if it's making any sort of savings to the business because nobody's telling me. Nobody's talking about it. Don't know.
Final question.
Impact.
I can't believe those values. That's unbelievable. Sorry, I've just unmuted myself, worked out. Unbelievable. But anyway, carry on.
No, keep. we always appreciate what you have to say, Paul.
Pardon me, Ian?
Always appreciate what you have to say, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll close that up and share that. 100% no.
That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Interesting. I'm seeing most major tier 1 contractors and some tier 2s seeing massive positive benefits of VR when they're applying it. So we'd love to have the conversations.
But
it might be if there's someone who's got a reason why, someone who's not a panelist, who's got a reason why they answered yes to the first one and no to the third one, perhaps they could be made a panelist so they could tell us why.
Well, the thing for me is, with all this technology, it's making the customer or the client aware of benefits of the possible things that you couldn't do, things to bring about changes. And also, sad to bring this up, I've used this technology on various jobs over the years. Money, 10, 20% savings, risk, loss of face, loss of reputation, safety. It works, but it's to bring, I think, like I said, tried to mention earlier, LU, the minute the word game was mentioned, they thought it was crazy. And I had the head of Unity Technologies in the building, brought him in and a few others. Don't you ever bring us in with that into disrepute. And look at it now, the stuff that Vin's been doing, LU, TFL, and others. It does work. And it reduces risk.
Yeah.
100% think. There you go. Carry on. Sorry, just me.
Well, thanks, Paul. Can I just go to Francois? Francois, I'm gonna unmute you. If you want to ask the question direct, I'll send you a webcam request as well. But Francois, if you want to ask your question, I think you were aiming. Were you aiming at Max or Vin, or was it Sue?
I think I'm in.
Hi, Francois.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi.
Yes.
Nice to be on this call today. I'm actually coming from Toronto. I'm a colleague of Warren that you might know, that is in the UK for a bit.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I was playing with Unity last weekend. So Unity was mostly like a tool for games and for creating like 3D games. And I realized like last weekend that they have a product that is called Unity Reflect, and in which you can import some like Revit or Rhino model. And
Correct.
I didn't know if I like tried this, or maybe then like maybe you're using Unity as well, like on some project. I just wanted like some feedback because I'm very new to this space too. I'm just exploring stuff.
So I mean, we use primarily Unity as a platform for development. Probably 80%, 20% we use Unreal Engine, which is those are the two big games authoring tools that are used across industry. They both started off as games tools, but they've both moved into to support other spaces as well. Unreal pushing on quite rapidly. They've launched on, is it Unreal 5, Max? In the last
Unreal 5,
couple of games, which has got some really powerful stuff going on in there. But yeah, I mean, that's where you tend to start if you're not going to use the big proprietary authoring tools, you know, the Autodesks and Bentleys and things like that. That's where people are doing stuff. Yeah.
So I'll pick up on that, Francois. You asked specifically about Unity Reflect. So we were involved with the early beta release of Unity Reflect, and we actually had our technology at Autodesk University Vegas in November last year on the Unity stand, launching Reflect at the show. What it enables is a real-time link between the BIM authoring software, so your Autodesk Revit, your Rhinos, your ArchiCADs, and soon to be Navisworks, so that any updates done in real time in CAD are then reflected in VR. What they've released is a bunch of tools for things like iPhone, iPad, so that you can link to it. There are some gotchas with any of these technologies, but the power of it, if you're interested, my YouTube channel, we had the chap who was the architectural lead for the Notre Dame restoration project, and he was giving an Autodesk University
I've seen
talk.
this one, yeah.
And he turned up with, well, he logged into BIM 360 on our computer, downloaded the Revit models, and within 6 minutes, the entirety of the Notre Dame model was inside virtual reality, without having to touch a games engine, without having to do any model conversion, literally one click from Revit out into VR. So it's removing the technological barriers that people perceive. And the comment there about, well, someone mentioned gaming and suddenly people lose interest. What we consider it as is serious games, which is a terminology we borrowed from the automotive sector. But it's once you remove the technical challenge of bringing information into VR, and a lot of people say it as, oh, it's going to waste my time, my engineers have to be retrained, they have to learn new things that they don't use. Actually, it now sits into your existing tool chain, so your engineers don't need to learn anything more than clicking a new menu button on their menu bar.
Yeah.
But I've just sent you a LinkedIn request. Happy to have the conversation further.
But that's very interesting to say. You know, technologies, when it like disappear, it is like undistinguishable from magic technically.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. It's like a phone call. Like it's right now. I'm thinking I'm talking to you. I don't even think of all the gigs that are going under the ocean, right?
Yeah, quite.
Thanks, Francois, for the question. Max, I've got one other question. Now, unfortunately, it was from Alec Milosevic, and Alex has left. the question was based on the low energy Bluetooth example. Does this mean contractors can review interaction data between construction workers, trying to stay 2 meters apart to see where the most frequent proximity infractions are taking place and reshape the working environments on the fly to maintain progress, but more safely?
So it depends on the platform you're using. And some platforms will give you that granularity. Other platforms, it's more of a safety tool, so it will only be a first alert system. Again, it comes down to how much interaction between devices are. There was a lot of reports around the NHS contact tracing app around, because the devices would have to do so much communication, you'd have very little battery life because it would just burn through battery. But equally, the low power energy Bluetooth systems, for example, on Thames Tideway, the system is purely for emergency communications. So has this person fallen over, raise an alert, and then creating mesh networks so that you can communicate back to that person to check on them. Now, whether the software that you're using on that platform allows access to the level of data to track the person, I'm sure it would be great to have 500 words on the call and find out more about the legality of it. But for me, if I was out on site and my employee had asked me to wear this on my belt so that they can make sure that I'm safe, and it's not about checking whether I'm productive. Yeah, you always get people thinking, well, Big Brother's watching over me, but at the end of the day, if I go out on a construction site, I'm having to tally in on the tally in board so they know I'm on site. Who cares if they know that I'm where I am physically? Yes, they might be able to check, see whether or not I'm active and in the right place, but equally, I would like them to know that I'm safe. And yeah, so it comes down to just how you perceive and how you use it on site. It would come down to each construction employer and the system they're employing.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Max. I've brought everybody in that was on the attendee column. I brought them into the panelist box. Is there any other questions whilst we're all together? I've opened everybody's mic, so please feel free. I see, Roger, your webcam's working. If you've got anything you want to fire at the panelists, please go ahead.
Possibly one point. Hopefully I'm the right way up this week. I was basically it was picking up on a point that Vin made about proximity of workers, and Max has touched on it. Is there any overlap here between the work the pilot's going on the Isle of Wight at the moment with mobile phones and proximity? Is that working on this Bluetooth system? Is that anything that's similar?
So I'll jump in on that one. The Bluetooth on your phone is standard Bluetooth. It's the way they're trying to make it low power is only waking up the phone for a short amount of time to go, hey, who's around me? The system itself is just gathering, everyone is used to GUIDs in construction. With Bluetooth, every single chip in the phone has a unique ID. So this is how they can then see who it's going off and talking to. The problem with construction is a lot of sites have policies around uses of devices on site. We've had special interest groups in Comet before about this, whether you're using them in a sheet pen or you have to leave your phone in a locker before physically going on site. Because dropping something like this from 3 meters, it will hit someone with enough force to go through a hard hat and kill them. So unless it's in a proper case with a lanyard tether, you can understand people's reason for not allowing that sort of usage of device on site. There's nothing stopping you doing. And yeah, it might be a very quick way of being able to modify something that's been used for COVID and use it in construction, or equally use something that's in construction, modify it for COVID. But at this point, the technology, it comes down to what can you physically take out on site.
Okay, interesting.
The question regarding the Isle of Wight trial, what you'll find very interesting is the government has actually shown their hand, really. It was all around having a centralized system because they could then do the analysis on it and look for pockets of outbreaks. But the government has just spent an additional £3.8 million to also develop a non-centralized model, which is the way that Google and Apple suggested it would be GDPR compliant, because they're not confident the one on the Isle of Wight is actually going to give the results they need, considering the original planned rollout date nationwide for this contract track and trace app was today. Considering we've heard nothing from the government, nothing in the daily briefings, and nothing about the effectiveness of the trials on the Isle of Wight, does make me question how accurate and whether it's actually functioning and will ever be scalable to the point where 67 million users in the UK could download it.
Maybe we'll hear in 10 minutes, Max.
Well, here's hoping.
It's the COVID-19 briefing, isn't it, at 5 o'clock again? And I think, is it Boris delivering it today?
I don't remember, but again, please do read up on your own personal security. The data is meant to be anonymized in multiple places in the app. It's not in sending your details back to the government.
No,
GDPR is an interesting one because I'm also an NHS responder, and they've had problems with their app around GDPR. It's a common thing that people have. Until you get to a certain level of a type of application, bring in the GDPR question into the app you're building. I mean, personally, on the idea of being tracked, I'm not that bothered because, let's face it, we're all tracked by the mobile phone companies anyway. Everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people sell their soul to Facebook and LinkedIn and all these other social platforms that know what we buy, what we shop for, what we look at, and everything else. So quite frankly, if somebody wants to know where I am to see if I'm giving COVID to somebody next door, that might be quite useful. But anyway, without getting sidetracked.
The one caveat on that I'd say is, yes, I'm perfectly happy. I've got my location services turned on because that's my choice. And that's being shared with a multinational company that can then sell that data on. What I fear, and the reason I'm concerned about, say, like a centralized system as the NHS's original process, if they were then to mandate or bring into law the fact that your movement in order for you to go and freely move about the country, you had to have this app, and it's the big brother state. It's one thing for Google to know, having someone that can then turn around and say, you're not allowed out of your house and we're going to send the police after you because we've got the data, that's something else. Anyway, we digress. There's
Thanks, Max. We've got, for those that haven't asked any questions, the mic's open. Please feel free. Thanks very much for staying behind. Very much appreciated. So we've got Peter, we've got Riz, we've got Giovanna there at the top. Any questions from anybody? I did try to unmute everybody. Maybe I'll give everybody the opportunity there. Unmute all attendees. So there we are. So any questions, please jump in and ask away. I'm going to give it 6 more minutes, if that's okay with everybody. How does that work with you, Vin, Max?
Where's the beer?
Sue's dropped off.
Yeah, I need to go for a cycle at 5.
I'm just going to jump in to say hello. I don't know, do you hear me?
Yes,
hey, Dragon, how are you?
Hi, Max. This was a very interesting talk, so I quite enjoyed it. Maybe just sort of like looking beyond this pandemic. One thing when we talk about VR is that so far we relied on using VR equipment on site, whether that's using the cave or headsets. But now, since the practices are moving kind of from home, wherever that's possible, there's always this question, how will VR play into that kind of mode of working? So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about whether you are optimistic in terms of the uptake, because I think this wouldn't be the first time where we would really expect VR uptake, just because so much work is shifting remotely and online. So just kind of like maybe thoughts about how do you see this being shifted? And one consequence that Vin was already talking about is that this might require users to start buying and investing into these headsets or equipment. Now, that may not always be the case. So just kind of like thinking about the future practice of using VR and incorporating in construction practices.
I think my view is that we should think more about VR on demand rather than VR. So we use it when it's appropriate rather than just, I think the idea of building VR applications in some senses is actually, I'm starting to think, is a bit nonsensical. You know, VR is fine in games because you know, people want to have crazy experiences and things like that. But there's a danger with just thinking all the time about a VR application, which is just a headset, if you like. That's not going to give people the right sort of experience. And I think we should use the headset as a tool, as part of the application when it's appropriate, rather than just think the whole application is a headset application. You know, in the same way as you might use you know, a large screen or something like that to see something better or whatever. So start. You know, the other thing is, which I know I mentioned Second Life earlier. I mean, when that was at its heyday, people were massively engaged immersively looking at a 2D screen. They didn't need a headset at that point. And in a strange way, what happened was Second Life went off the rails a little bit on a social route and things. And everyone kind of forgot that was quite a powerful tool. Then headsets came along and everyone wants to get a headset on. And I think we lost the fact that you can actually, you know, get quite a lot of immersion from just looking at a screen if you've got the right application, if you like. So I think it's about, you know, thinking through these things rather than just diving into them. I suspect Max will probably agree.
Yeah, equally, and Dragner, obviously, you're coming from the academic side, so looking at distance learning, one of the great things that a lot of parents have been utilizing has been apps on Apple and Google for actually bringing AR content into the real world. So we've had people pinning 3D models of things like the surface of Mars into their living rooms. They can then go and virtually explore a 3D environment whilst using technology they already have to hand. A great example here is I've got Google Street View on my phone, and yes, I can scroll around, I can look around and experience a place virtually. But the nice thing with Google is it also has these goggles, and you can get very inexpensive Google glasses, which you just take your phone, you enable the goggle mode, and off it goes. He says, not doing it recently, but the idea is this would then turn into a Google Street View, which you can then wear as a low-cost device because your students already have these. I mean, this is the iPhone 6s. This has got 400 or 500 times more power, computing power, than they put the man on the moon with. Your students hopefully will have newer phones. Ah, there we go. So now the models come up and I can stick this into the pair of glasses and experience it. So if you're talking, like Vin was saying, about a bridge, you can go and have a look at Brunel's Bridge in the Menai Straits, or go and have a look at the one crossing over Bristol Channel. This information's out there and you've got it at your fingertips. And well, I would love to be 20 years younger because the technology that's coming around now is phenomenal. I was at the birth of the internet and that was amazing, but it's now taken for granted.
Yeah, and I think that point about the experience is probably the key. One of the things that we are learning now is that there is always this attempt to recreate sort of a classroom experience using virtual or digital technologies. But there's rarely, you know, kind of this idea about how to create new types of experiences, because we project so much of what we do on a daily basis into the technologies. So I'm just kind of like trying to envision, you know, this more creative way of using what we have. And even like students who are so used to using these technologies and they're so very good, one always gets surprised to see in other ways how they just end up being quite clueless. or how technologies can also play very disengaging and kind of very different effect. So there's always this question about what is that experience that we're trying to create that extends what people are sort of used to in a daily work.
I think that's it's really important in the sense that when you're transitioning people to new technologies, that it's very easy for those who can see some new way to think, why aren't other people seeing what I can see, and why are they stuck? And what you need to find bridges. And I go back to the thing I mentioned earlier, where we were doing some work way back with one of the universities in Second Life, and they wanted to do some lectures, and the guys were insistent on us building a virtual lecture theatre, because that's what they did in the real world. And we said, well, why do you want to do that? And I couldn't really get it, but in the end, I understood what it was. It was a stepping stone. By doing that, they could do the virtual lecture theatre. Then next, they could go to the bridge. Yeah, I could see the bridge or be on the moon or whatever you want it to be, but you need to guide people through it. It's a bit like VR. 360 images are not VR, but actually they're a great stepping stone because they run easily on phones and things like that. So I think we have to be careful sometimes with innovation and technology that we're not we're too far out, and we're not understanding where people are, and we have to show pathways.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dragan, for coming in and asking some questions there. Thanks for joining the session today, and thanks to everybody. We still have a few questions left, but sorry?
You're flickering away for some reason.
I'm flickering.
Yeah.
Oh.
It says you're paused. There you go.
No. Well, listen, we haven't had any. We only had one challenge today on the technology front, and that was the poll questions. But we got there in the end. I'm sorry that everybody couldn't vote on that, and that's one of those challenges. But really appreciate it. The session today I thought was very good. The lock-in where we can, we've got more questions. We've had nearly 55 minutes of questions, which I think is tremendous. Unprecedented, I think, is the word. So I really appreciate it. Thanks very much for our panelists. Thanks very much for the presenters. Vin, thanks very much for your efforts in putting it together. Thanks to Sue. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to Max. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks to Ian. Thanks to everybody that came along. We had quite a few on the lineup today. I think moving everybody into a panelist position afterwards, I think was great. Maybe what I need to do next time is give people a bit more heads up and be able to use the webcam as well as the microphone, because there was a couple of issues in unmiking people, which was a challenge. But I think we've had 30 questions, looks like. Whilst some of them have answered, some of them have been answered directly. There's a young lady. Yes.
I've just been told it's the end of the day and I've got to go and help with bath time.
So,
We'll see.
Thanks everybody. There's Paul.
Bye everyone. Keep safe.
Yeah, we'll make the recording available as soon as it's downloaded, and then hopefully we'll see everybody next week for more of the same. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Good.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers.